As a boy wonder in Boston, he brought a championship to a city whose baseball business had operated under a curse. Now Theo Epstein takes on the same task in Chicago.
Your role as a savior of an entire region, how do you feel about all that?
I don't see it that way. I'll let you describe it.
With an owner who knows what it takes to master a volatile market, using innovative tools and old-fashioned acumen, turning the Cubs franchise around would be an executive achievement for the ages.
Our message to our players and to our organization is embrace the challenge.
What is their plan, and what are their prospects for success? This week, we analyze Theo's second act on Sportfolio. Hello, I'm Rick Horrow, and this week on Sportfolio, we take an inside look at one of the most fascinating sports business stories of 2012, the front office reboot of the Chicago Cubs under the leadership of Tom Ricketts and Theo Epstein. After a 9-year run as Red Sox general manager ended on the sour note of a September collapse, Boston ownership agreed to let Epstein negotiate an exit from the organization. Ricketts hired him as Cubs president of baseball operations in October 2011. This spring, I spent time with both Ricketts and Epstein to better understand how they came together and what they're aiming to accomplish. And I discovered that in many ways, both men have been working towards this partnership for years.
Yeah, it's come a long way. You know, in the late 80s, when I started, I was in some fantasy leagues, and I became like a Bill James addict. I read all the abstracts he put out back then.
So did you think when you were playing Stratomatic and reading the Bill James handbook that you'd be investing, up to $1 billion in a business based on that?
No, but it was always kind of a dream. I always thought it'd be, the dream job. And actually, on my business school application, would have been 1990-ish. I wrote that my dream job is to own the Cubs.
Ricketts bought the Cubs from the Tribune Company in 2009, and the principles of bond trading have served him well in baseball.
It was really good to have that bond background when we were working through the financing of the team because of the volatility in the market at the time. This was like '09, and things were just kind of crazy.
And recruiting executive talent in your banking and investment banking business, really important. Did you take some of those skills in landing Theo Epstein?
I had a lot of time to analyze the market and see which teams had consistently outperformed other teams. I had a lot of time to talk to people in the industry and get their thoughts and opinions on who was the best fit for the Cubs.
Epstein qualified on both counts, but why leave Boston, where he'd led the Red Sox to 6 playoff appearances since 2002?
I knew I probably didn't want to be in one place forever. Just the way I'm wired, I think you should do lots of different things in your life. So 10 years at the Red Sox and a couple World Series, I was kind of looking forward to the next challenge. And once you've worked in Boston, I feel like you can't go just anywhere.
Interesting dynamic. Teams run by financially oriented guys with some underperforming brand and a lot of upside. Accurate assessment of the similarities between the two teams?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it in that way. Sure, yeah, John, Henry, and Tom Ricketts have that in common for sure.
Besides the 2 rings and beyond the 2 rings, why is he such a good fit for the organization you're trying to build?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, the focus on scouting and player development. I mean, there are no shortcuts in baseball. There is no way around having a good player development organization if you want to be successful. Obviously, he brings an analytical background and the ability to apply some of the quantitative metrics that other teams have been using probably a little more effectively than we have over the past few years. But thirdly, I think that he builds teams. He brings in guys. He's always very quick to point out that it's a group effort. Everyone, kind of rows in the same direction and works hard together.
Theo leads people in a common direction, but not by rewarding conformity. Los Angeles Angels GM Jerry Dipoto learned this as a Red Sox scout early in Epstein's tenure as a general manager.
And Theo taught me that there's no stupid question. There's sometimes stupid answers, but there is no stupid question. Always be willing to ask that next one. And quite frankly, made you want to turn over every stone and be the guy who came to him and said, I think I found something that's going to work for us.
We try to create an environment where there's a lot of discourse, a lot of dissent, almost like a law school classroom. So to question each other, don't take things personally, question our own assumptions about the game, question each other's assumptions about the game, and you can progress doing that. The
ability to think like a lawyer and develop processes like a lawyer has helped you in get to where you are today?
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure that that's that's solely the territory of lawyers. I think that humans are built that way. They're built to sort of question things. You don't just go through life accepting things blindly. But yeah, certainly in law school they encourage that type of critical thought, and that was probably the one thing I did take out of law school.
You've worked for owners who come from finance. You're now working with owners who come from finance. Your predisposition toward analytics, does that all go hand in hand? Are you more predisposed to look at numbers because you work with owners who have worked with numbers all their lives too?
Maybe. My own personal baseball philosophy is really down the middle. I try to balance objective analysis with subjective analysis, and I feel like the truest picture of the player comes through both lenses, both analytics and traditional scouting. Hopefully we bring the best of both worlds. I think the best organizations also look at both paradigms.
Research and intuition, numbers and nuance. Winners in baseball and finance excel at both. Tom Ricketts explains the philosophy.
Well, I mean, you can bring it back to the bond market. I mean, obviously, that's a very mathematical, very just very quantitative market. Yet, your success in that market is also determined by your ability to relate to people, understand their needs, and make sure that what you're doing for them is what giving them the service they need. And so, there's a lot of parallels there.
But bonds don't break curfew at night. Bonds don't have a whole bunch of evening. They can go out, and bonds don't snap their shoulders. Bonds don't blow up in the clubhouse.
They can kind of get injured, I suppose. I think it really comes back to the fact that you can do all the analysis you want, but you have to keep it in perspective. It is just one piece of a big puzzle, and it's still a people business. So it's one piece of the puzzle, and the bond market is a good analogy for that.
Tom Ricketts and Theo Epstein are clearly on the same page. Later in the program, we'll hear more about how they intend to turn the page on a century of Cubs futility. But coming up, how much credit does Theo deserve for reversing the fortunes of the Red Sox franchise? It wasn't a one-man show.
I see myself as, a small part of a leadership team that helped create something pretty great.
We'll review Theo's first act with baseball business analyst Vince Gennaro after a brief intermission on Sportfolio. Welcome back to Sportfolio. Theo Epstein was named general manager of the Boston Red Sox in November 2002. And within 2 years, that franchise ended an 86-year drought without a championship. Now he's taken on the challenge of leading another storied team that hasn't won a World Series in 103 seasons.
Your role as a savior of an entire region, how do you feel about all that?
I don't see it that way. I'll let you describe it. Looking back at my time in Boston, I see myself as a small part of a leadership team that helped create something pretty great and created a baseball operation that accomplished a lot of things and created the possibility for sustained success, performance at a high level. It got us into the playoffs 6 times. That's why we won 2 World Series. And here, we're looking at it the same way. We need to have patience and discipline and build something that can last. We realize there are no shortcuts, and we're going to try to bring some leadership here and get everyone on board, united behind a common message.
To put into perspective what Theo accomplished in Boston, we welcome Vince Gennaro, president of the Society for American Baseball Research. He's also author of Diamond Dollars, The Economics of Winning in Baseball, and he joins us from San Francisco. Hey, Vince, we've just been talking about the value Theo places on team building in the front office he built in Boston. It was clearly unique, wasn't it?
It really was. I mean, a lot of times people win based on how well they execute. Do they do the same things that other people are doing, but do they do them better? Well, in the case of Theo, that wasn't the formula. While he executed very well, he really changed the game. He completely changed the business model of how to run a baseball team. I mean, he built on the underpinnings that Billy Beane had put in place and that Mark Shapiro had put in place in Cleveland, but in reality, he took it to another level.
Well, taking that to another level, other than bringing in very smart people, did he make lasting structural innovations? Did he change the traditional org chart and titles, for example?
Yes, he did. I mean, he really institutionalized this whole new way of thinking, which is using data-driven processes to improve the probability of success of your decisions. And he brought in people like Bill James, who was essentially the father of sabermetrics, or statistical analysis in baseball. Tom Tippett, who had invented one of the greatest, most complex baseball simulation games that existed. So people like that and the way he institutionalized it in the Red Sox really changed baseball.
Gutsy, innovative moves. And in 2002, he took over a Red Sox team, and they'd won 93 games. They'd finished second in the American League in runs scored, third in ERA. You could really, I guess, make the argument that he was just in the right place at the right time, or not?
Well, no, I don't think so. I mean, I do think he had some things going for him in terms of the base that he was building on. But clearly the Red Sox were in need of at least the finishing touches, or maybe more. And one of the things he did coming out of the 2002 season was he made 4 big moves. He brought in David Ortiz, Bill Miller, Kevin Millar, and Todd Walker. 4 big pieces, and he did it for under $9 million in total salary. And what the Red Sox did was they increased their runs scored from an already promising level by 100 runs for 2003 and by almost the same amount for 2004 when they won their first World Championship.
Those guys really exceeded expectations, didn't they?
Absolutely, and a great example is David Ortiz. Here's a guy who really was on the scrap heap at that point in his career, picked up by the Red Sox, put in Fenway Park, a guy who was a power hitter that could hit the ball the opposite way as a lefty and use that green monster to his advantage. The net result, at home for his career at Fenway Park, he has a 1,000 OPS, which is second only to Ted Williams in all-time Red Sox history. So that shows you what he was able to do in that ballpark. Theo subscribed to the theory that if we could win 2/3 of our games at home and build a team to do that, even if we broke even on the road, we'd still be a 95-win team.
But once he won the first title in 2004, he came back and did it again. What was the key to the 2007 World Championship in your view?
You know, I think the key to the 2007 World Championship had as much to do with drafting and developing players, which he showed he was also very good at. Of course, that takes some time. So even when he was an assistant GM in 2002 and working through his first 4 years of GM, it really took that length of time to harvest the kinds of players like Papelbon and Dustin Pedroia and Jacoby Ellsbury, who became factors on that 2007 club. So again, it's a different way to do it, but he showed he could do it either way.
Segue to very, very recent history. Rough times for the Red Sox at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. How much of this can be put on Theo, and does it cast a shadow on his legacy?
Well, look, I think as the leader of the organization, he has to bear some responsibility. But I really don't think that having 1 year out of 9 that, you know, things didn't go your way or they fell apart, I don't think is enough to undo the legacy that he has put in place. And the fact that he, again, institutionalized this new process and really changed the game for not just the Red Sox, but for many clubs.
All right, present day. What do you think is the most immediate impact he's making on the Cubs?
Well, I think really he's walking into a very different situation in Chicago than he walked into in Boston, in the sense that I think Boston was a little bit closer to being competitive when he arrived than are the Cubs right now. But I think his first big move is to make sure that he can have an outstanding draft in his first go-around, harvest players from the Dominican Republic and Venezuela, the Latin American players who are free agents essentially, and be a very selective value buyer in the market for players, and look for players who he can put into a unique situation, be it Wrigley Field or other situations that'll improve their chances of success.
Vince Gennaro, thanks very much for joining us on Sportfolio.
You bet.
Every major league organization now factors statistical analysis into front office decisions. Theo Epstein stayed ahead of the curve in Boston by investing in proprietary analytical systems that gave him access to better information than his competitors. And he's doing the same thing in Chicago with the help of Bloomberg Sports. Coming up, we'll ask him about his mission and the tools he's using to reach it. And sticking with the theme of Theo, here's our Sportfolio stumper. At age 28, Theo Epstein became the youngest general manager in baseball history when he was hired by the Red Sox. Who was the youngest GM in baseball history before Theo? Answer when we return. Here's the answer to our Sportfolio stumper. The youngest GM in baseball history before Theo Epstein was Randy Smith, who took the helm at age 29 in 1993. Much has changed in the world of baseball information over the 10 years since Theo took charge in Boston. every club has access to mountains of raw statistical material. It's what they do with it that makes the difference. Theo Epstein and the Cubs went to Bloomberg Sports, which is also owned by our parent company, Bloomberg LP, to develop customized tools for data analysis.
It's becoming certainly a more level playing field and fewer obvious competitive advantages, especially with new streams of data, like the pitch effects and hit effects and field effects that can be tweaked and filtered and looked at in a certain way that can create a competitive advantage. But a lot of the data that's been out there for years and years and years has been combed through and looked at so many different ways that I think maybe to a degree you can get competitive advantages, but guys are really looking at it the same way. Now, there's always the possibility for big breakthroughs and completely unique thought and that'll be transformative. But I think that these days that's more tied to sort of finding new streams of data than it is looking at the same stuff a different way.
Do you constantly have to evolve your process in order to increase the likelihood of coming up with that transformative bit of data?
Yeah, well, in a new place here, we needed to find a process first, before we could polish it, and we were looking to go from 0 to 60 as quickly as possible.
Like all executives, Theo will ultimately be evaluated on measurable results. But to reach those goals, he first has to change a culture.
Culture change, to me, it doesn't involve a lot of data. It involves values and properly communicating them. I think you have to set out a vision for what you want to stand for, and then a plan on how you're going to get there, and then you have to have good communication and follow-up. Anyone can sit there and talk about values all day, but you have to bring in players who exhibit those values. You have to have consequences if there's behavior that doesn't reflect those standards, and so on and so forth. As far as evaluating players in the draft for their makeup and off-field characteristics and character, I think you can take both a subjective and an objective approach and get to know the player, get to know his background as best you possibly can, get to know what he was like when he's gone through adversity, and then you can also do some objective testing as well.
The Cubs are effectively $1 billion business. You make key, important, strategic decisions all the time. You can lay out the qualitative analysis and quantitative all you want to, and looking at last September Red Sox, for example, things aren't always in your control. So how do you reconcile that in your own mind?
Our job in the front office is to build sound processes and sound systems and good people to implement those processes. And in baseball, when you do that, you can shift the odds maybe from 50-50 on any one decision to 55-45 would be a best case scenario. You have to be patient and use time to your advantage and understand there's going to be a turn over the course of several decisions, several dozen decisions, several hundred decisions. If you have the right processes and the right people implementing them, you'll start to see things move in your favor.
Is there a Cubs mission statement that you've institutionalized?
Yeah, there is. We'll keep it to ourselves, but it involves, it certainly involves building off a foundation of scouting and player development and getting to a point where we can be an annual postseason contender and win multiple World Series. And it really starts with defining a Cubs way, how we're going to teach the game in the minor leagues, what we're going to stand for as an organization, uniting the whole organization behind that. And that takes a lot of hard work. You got to write a manual for how you're going to teach the game. You got to get buy-in. You got to take the time to get to know each player and develop them to their fullest. But those are the things that winning organizations do.
Yeah, I understand. The interesting thing about baseball is successful people in the business fail 7 out of 10 times. And so you won the series twice. This is your 10th year. If you win it this year, you will have batted 300. Are you entering with a slugger's confidence?
We'll see. I think you start focusing on the end result a little too much and you can lose your way. I think the important thing, again, is everyone knows what the goal is, right? I mean, everyone associated with it. It's actually an advantage for us. We all know. We have clarity about our mission, 103 years worth of clarity, to win the World Series. So you start the process of analysis. What are the most important factors? Well, we need a strong farm system. We need a great scouting operation. We need, a big league team that reflects certain ideals, and we need good, young, controllable player, impact-type players. So then you break it down further. What elements go into that? So in the end, it comes back to good people and good processes. So we're spending a lot of time working on attracting good people to the organization and building sound processes so we can start inching our way towards that goal.
Coming up, how much does moving forward involve looking backward? And do Ricketts and Epstein want to wipe the slate clean or use the past as a motivator? Answer straight ahead on Sportfolio. Get Sportfolio wherever you go on the Bloomberg TV Plus app for iPad. The Cubs franchise has changed ownership hands only 3 times in the last 100 years. So it's accurate to say that Tom Ricketts, who bid $900 million to buy the team and closed the deal for $845 million, is invested in the club's success like no other individual in history. I was curious, would Tom Ricketts and Theo Epstein prefer to ignore the team's uninspiring past, or do they use the tradition of futility as a motivator?
Everyone knows the history. You can't do anything about it. I think that our message to our players and to our organization is embrace the challenge. I mean, the fact is that everyone knows when it happens, that'll be the most valuable championship ring in the history of sports. And to be there on that day and to be one of the people that contributed to that success, it'll be unbelievable. So I think that, while it certainly has, it's something we want to get behind us, it's something we have to embrace and accept, but full said, you can't change the past and you can't focus on it.
I think the history is important, tradition's important. You have to embrace it. At the same time, you can't completely immerse yourself in it. I mean, our sights are set clearly on the future, but we do so with a healthy respect for everything that's come before and with a recognition that we have a lot to learn from what's come before as well, both good and bad. So I think our fans feel the same way.
If there are some Series A bonds out there redeemable only if and when the Cubs win the World Series, should we buy them?
Yes. I mean, I have to look at the numbers, but yeah, I think there's no doubt. We're heading the right direction. I think that everyone should be confident that going forward, the Cubs are going to make smart decisions. They'll make smart long-term decisions and build toward an era where we're going to be consistently successful. And and if you just keep knocking on that door every year, you're going to get in.
Tom Ricketts and Theo Epstein both understand what it takes to open doors. They bring the intellectual capital, organizational acumen, and work ethic to build a successful operation. And it'll be absolutely fascinating to see how quickly and how thoroughly their efforts pay off. Well, that's all for this edition of Sportfolio. Many thanks to Tom Ricketts and Theo Epstein for spending time with us. And thanks also to Vince Gennaro, our friends at Sabre, and our colleagues at Bloomberg Sports. I'm Rick Horrow. Thanks for watching. See you next time.